on day two, I had about 40 people in my inbox and growing with people that wanted to audition for it. And so, I did a lot of listening to people, and there's a lot of great narrators there. There was a number of good ones I could have chosen. But yours really stood out. I really felt like you really showed a patience of mind, a determination to get the phrasing right, and the proper emphasis on certain words and phrases. I thought yours was head and shoulders above some of the competitors there. So I was very happy to choose you for the work, and I feel like it gives it kind of like a space and a little bit of grandeur, and it dresses it up a little bit, which I appreciate.
I gave up on Jesus over 30 years ago. Raised in a strict Christian household of the Baptist sect, my own true seeking led me to believe that what I learned as a young Christian did not jive with my actual experience in the world, eventually leading to my schism with the church. My resulting search took me elsewhere. Tommy Sage, how are you?
I'm doing very well, and yourself, Graham?
Very good. What's that background there? It looks fab.
Oh, I love it. This is it's kind of like a mandala tapestry that
Yeah.
I got at a music festival a couple of years ago. And it's pretty brilliant to just hang back and look at, and you can kind of get lost in it. You start to unfocus your vision, and you get this like 3D kind of tunnel effect. Let me scoot out a little bit. See how this
Yeah. But it looks great with
yeah,
your head right in the center too. It looks like everything is you are the beginning of everything, and
yeah,
everything's
it does
radiating
kind of
from
work
you.
out that way. I'm kind of like radiating out, the
So is
mysteries
that
of the
an
universe or
actual
whatever.
tapestry, or is that a background you've managed to put on the Zoom thing we're doing here?
Oh no, that's a real
That's
tapestry.
an
So yeah,
actual physical tapestry. Oh,
it's
look at that! There it is. There's the proof.
uh,
There's the proof. It even
we got
flutters.
ripples in the pond here.
So
So,
where are you?
I'm in Northampton, Massachusetts.
Okay, the Northeast. It's an area of the United States I've not been to. I've traveled. I used to visit the United States twice a year when I was in radio. I used to go to radio conventions, some talk radio conventions and morning show conventions, and I travel a lot. But the Northeast is somewhere I missed. I don't know why. What can you tell me about where you are?
Well, I'm in Western Massachusetts, so when people think of Massachusetts, they tend to think of Boston. Boston kind of rules the region, and I grew up in the Boston area, but out here
Okay.
in Western Mass, it's more like living in the sticks a little bit. Cheaper living. There's rivers and hills and hiking, and Northampton is one of the most liberal cities in the whole country. So very much arts and entertainment focused, and a lot of great people here. And then
Okay.
you get four seasons too. You definitely get four seasons in New England. They say if you don't like the weather, just wait a minute, and it's totally true.
And is the winter as brutal as somewhere like, say, Chicago?
Oh yeah, it can be. It can be. I mean, Chicago has the extra wind factor and whatnot that we only get occasionally here sometimes. But we're about the same latitude, and yeah, it can get pretty bad. It can get pretty. Some years we get 3 feet of snow all in one shot, and blizzards and whatnot, and so yeah, it gets pretty wild. It's snowy in the winter, and it's hot in the summer, and it's beautiful in the fall. And then where we are emerging from spring here, with all the flowers coming out of the ground and the the trees sprouting, and it's just I love the four seasons, and you get to see the whole cycle of life unfold before your eyes.
Yeah, it's nice. I lived in Australia for a while, and they don't really get the four seasons. Here in the UK, we do, but in Australia, it's a fabulous country, Australia, but they don't really have the four seasons thing happening. They don't. It's nice to know where you are in the year just by looking out the window, isn't it?
Yeah, well, I was just down in Fort Lauderdale, Florida, a couple months ago on vacation, and I was hanging out there with talking to some of the locals, and that's one of the things they said. They had moved down 20 years ago, and they say they only get three seasons down there, and it's just basically like rain, hot, and windy,
Yeah.
and the
Yeah.
trees don't change colors or anything, and it can kind of make it harder to track the time as it passes by.
Yeah.
'Cause it's not so obvious what the seasons are, but
So you grew up in Boston. Why did you move out of Boston?
Well, I traveled around the country quite a bit. I, uh, I dropped out of college at one point and kind of ended up kind of free on the road with really nowhere to go and nothing to do, and just kind of free spirited around the country for a while. So I got to see, a good variety of what was out here for me, and lived in California for a while, San Francisco area. Spent some time in Washington State. Um, and I decided I really like it back here. I really like Western Mass. It's kind of got everything I'm looking for, and it does help to be somewhat close by to where I grew up and have some old
Yeah.
friends and some family, and
Yeah.
not just be in a remote. It's something to be said for having connections. Starting over like we do so much in our culture these days. So many kids kind of move off to chase the job, and they have to start from scratch, and then they wake up and they're 35 years old and they have like one friend, and they don't, they feel disconnected. And that's part of it, is if you move away from all your family and your childhood friends, you're losing connections, to a certain extent. And there's a cost to that, I think.
Yeah. And what were you studying before you dropped out?
I was studying computer science. I was going to
Okay.
be a computer programmer. I've always been really good at science and math and all the automated tests they have you do in high school. They would predict that I would make a great computer programmer. Um, and it was fun. I still dabble in programming. I do my own web design and my own graphics and whatnot. Um, but I had a hard time sitting behind a desk all day, staring at a screen for 10 hours a day, where, in my off time, I was kind of chasing the mysteries of the universe and trying to figure out what makes everything tick. And then I have to stop and go spend 10 hours cramming on some program. And I just knew, I just knew deep inside of me that this is not what I wanted to do with my life. And so I just kind of jumped ship and just kind of abandoned all the dreams and plans that I would say that I had made, but I really didn't make them. It was more like the society around me made them, my community made them, and kind of had me on kind of a conveyor belt
Yeah.
towards it. And I decided I didn't like where it was headed, and I decided, so I got off and just kind of just said, screw it, damn the consequences. Um, it's kind of like a sink or swim kind of situation when you jump ship. But you know, I was able to find shore at some point, and got to kind of carve out the life I wanted to make on my own terms
What
without being
age were you
subject
when
to.
you had this epiphany then?
I think I was 18 years old,
Oh, so
around
quite
18.
early, because I had a similar thing. I'd worked as a pipe fitter on a construction site for 3 years, and I studied air conditioning and found myself in Sydney, Australia as an air conditioning mechanic. And I decided one day I want to be on the radio. That's what I want to do. And so I pursued that. And the guy who ran the air conditioning company, who was about to retire and give me the company, said, and we had the contract for all the schools, police stations, courthouses in Sydney pretty much. And I said, no, really don't want to do this, Rob. I want to be on the radio. And he thought I'd lost my mind, but I just knew it wasn't. It was so unfulfilling for me. I wanted to do something, I don't know, with a bit more of a creative and communication, whatever it was that, But I found that since I've retired from radio, I found that audiobooks brings me that and much more. And I meet people from all over the world, the authors of these amazing books that I help to convert into audiobooks for them. And it's been so fulfilling. And you're one of those guys. So thank you very much for giving me extra dimensions and perspective about all sorts of different things. And in this case, it was would you call it a rewrite of the Lord's Prayer that you did? Is that fair to say?
I think a rewrite is a good phrase for it. Basically, kind of, when you hear the same language over and over and over and over again, it tends to lose its meaning, and you kind of are just reciting something by rote. And I've found that by kind of reframing things, you can kind of, reattach to the meaning of them. And
Okay. Well, take me through the process then, because the book, it seems it's very in depth, and you take the Lord's Prayer line by line, and
yes,
then
line by line, yeah. And
explain the true meaning behind it. How did you come to this? How did you work this out?
Well, how I got there was kind of interesting. It was kind of by accident. I've been a spiritual seeker for a long time, working hard at, kind of trying to get closer to the source, and done a lot of work over the years. I'm 48 years old. I've been on this path since I was 18 or so, and kind of consider myself somewhat of an urban shaman in that, I've been using psychedelics my whole adult life in order to kind of see, behind the curtain, so to speak, a little bit. A lot of people these days use psychedelics to party, to have a good time, to look at some visuals and some hallucinations with their friends, maybe at a concert or something like that. But I was more interested in kind of like closing my eyes and trying to find God. And so that's kind of been the path been on my whole life. And then, the last few years, I've just really devoted myself to the path and was able to really make some groundbreaking progress in my own personal journey. A lot of it is making amends, a lot of it is dropping bad habits, a lot of it is, being honest with yourself, and a lot of it is things like healing childhood trauma. And I kind of overcame I've been working on that stuff, just overcoming some, stuff we all have from, we all get, roughed up a bit in childhood by our parents or our peers or society, and we all have some scars that linger if we don't address them. So I was in that process of that work, and then this spring I ended up getting a prescription for at-home ketamine therapy, and took 3 times a week. I was kind of going under and really going out of body a bunch of the time, and but with a state of consciousness too. Like I was able to like remember everything I experienced, and I could just kind of like, I don't know, it was like accessing this spiritual database of knowledge where, like, if I, seek and ye shall find, I would go after answers, and like they would, be given to me. And so it kind of allowed me to kind of tie up what I was doing with my trauma work, and then got to the point where spirit kind of guided me that like that my work there was done, that I had cleaned up my childhood traumas, and I'd cleaned up all this energy stuff, and that it was time to go move on to the next stage, which is, like after you heal yourself, to heal others or help them heal themselves. So as I was going through these sessions where basically what I would do is I would put on a blindfold so you get no light. I put in really good earplugs and lay in my bed, and I would take this prescription ketamine that's pretty popular in the United States right now. I don't know if it's legal in England,
I don't
but
know if it's legal here. I know Elon Musk has been accused of using
oh
it
yeah, Elon
recently.
Musk, he's the poster child for ketamine's criminal.
Oh, is he okay?
But that's not even really, who knows what he's doing. I mean,
Yeah,
Elon
yeah,
Musk can get his hands on anything he wants. So
yeah.
only he knows what he's doing there. He may have, some people suspect he's got like the Neuralink prototype and is kind of spazzing out on him. And
Right.
who knows? Only he knows.
Hmm.
But but in any case, so yeah, it's up and coming here. It's have a lot of success working with people with PTSD and things like that. A lot of
Well, you,
veterans
you
have had
mentioned
success
you
with it.
mentioned childhood trauma, and obviously I don't want to pry, and I don't want you to talk about anything you're uncomfortable talking about. But can you give us an idea? I mean, you mentioned your parents. Were your parents abusive or narcissistic, or
Well, I love my parents. They tried really hard, but they were very, very hardcore born again Christians who, believed in spanking your children, even at a very young age. My very earliest memories are of me getting whooped pretty good as a young child. And it really made me quite fearful, as a person. It took a long time to learn to not be afraid of people. And and there was a lot of other things too that went along with that. There was kind of this
Mm.
whole like well, when the day came when I decided I didn't believe in Jesus anymore. They told me they wouldn't support me anymore, and that it was up to myself to figure out how to pay for college. And which is one of the things to let me to jumping ship and dropping out was my parents said, basically, we don't want to support you anymore. And that was at 18 years old. And
Wow, that's quite brutal. Yeah, at
yeah, yeah,
that
yeah, it was
age. Yeah.
brutal. And it's kind of like, that's what they say about cults. I'm not saying all Christians are in a cult or anything like that, but that's one of the characteristics of a cult is they shun you when you want to leave.
Mm.
They try to prevent you from leaving, and then when you do leave, they shun you. And I got to experience that. Um, I was okay with it at the time, and since then we've made amends. My parents and I have made amends. They're
Okay, that's
they're
good.
older, they're softer. It's been a long time since then. It's been 30 years. Plenty of time for people to kind of like stretch and grow, and come to compromises and whatnot. So we've done that, but it was a struggle growing up. There were a lot of things I was fearful of. One of the more recent things that I had overcome as a trauma was something came up about a movie I saw when I was maybe 6 years old, and it was in church, and it was basically like one of these Armageddon end of the world type movies where people are being like in the end they're being rounded up and executed like guillotine style behind the town hall for not taking the mark of the beast. And I'm being told that this is true and real, and that this is like an allegory, but this is what's going to happen to us. And I was like 6 years old, and I believe this stuff so it shaped my whole life. It did. I was a very when I was a Christian, I was a hardcore Christian. I was like a little missionary kid, and knew the Bible really well. I was learning Hebrew and Greek so I could get the original translations. So when I did leave it, it was a complete 180 for me to go from being a full-on Bible school kid to saying I don't believe any of it. And a lot of chaos ensued as a result of that because I kind of made the mistake as a young man of saying, well, if these rules aren't true, then there are no rules, and I
Mm.
can do whatever I want. And kind of lived pretty chaotically for a while. It took a while to realize that there's natural law and there's natural consequences, and there is such thing as right and wrong in a lot of situations. And good thing I learned eventually, and turn it around.
Do you think there's a lot of people like that who are, whatever their faith is, if they're, strict to the discipline of the faith, that without that faith, there's nothing keeping them together? As in particular with right and wrong.
I think there's a lot of people like that because I hear stories about people coming to find Christianity maybe after a life of not paying any attention to it or not caring. And when you ask them why, it's like they feel this kind of greater spiritual calling or this stirring inside or this notion that like, this is where the people that are moral are. But it's not necessarily about the Christianity aspect of it. It's more of like that's just they feel like is their only option really. Like this is you're either a Christian or you're not, and they don't even think about far out concepts such as Buddhism or Taoism or any of the other myriad of belief systems in the world. It's kind of like if you're embedded in a Christian culture, it's like, oh, you're a Christian or you're Jewish or maybe you're Muslim. And, you may not even consider that, well, maybe there's other explanations to, where we come from and what's going on that maybe has, some more commonality, with what you feel. And because Christianity, I feel as I write in the book, I just feel like it's been kind of used against us in ways, used against society in
What, to
ways.
control us?
Yeah, yeah, to have us living in fear, to have us, do what we're told. Um, I mean, the Bible was written by men, and um, men behave like men. And if you look throughout all of history, especially people in positions of power and control, they do whatever they can to maintain or enhance that power and control. And, they color everything they do with that behavior.
Hmm.
And that's why I wanted to escape behind the translation of the Bible. Because I've avoided Jesus for a long time. I've been studying everything else. I've just been, really not interested in going back there. And then it was this ketamine journey I was on where Spirit said to me, Spirit guided me to like, hey, take a look at Jesus again. And so I just started reading the New Testament and just reading his words. And I was like, yep, yep, yep. And then I got to one that was like, this doesn't ring true to me. And then, so for instance, like hell, that's one, and leading up to the Lord's Prayer, there's some passages about hell. And, that's one of the big sticking points with Christianity, but it's one of those things that personally I don't believe in. I don't believe that hell exists. I believe that we create our own hell for ourselves in this life. But I don't believe that there is a state of punishment waiting for us after all of this. Um, but, it's a major tenet of Christianity. So where does it come from? Well, in this verse, I wish I could tell you exactly which verse it was. Um, when you get to the word of what's translated as hell, it's the fires of Gehenna. And then you look into what Gehenna is, and it was like a trash heap kind of on the border between two countries, like a gigantic ditch or chasm where they would throw trash and also the bodies of people that weren't deserving of an honorable burial. So it was kind of like the trash heap, and they would burn it once in a while to kind of, keep it down, and it would stink, and it was just a nasty place. But you know that's different than the hell that they paint to us as a picture. That's just kind of like, if he says do this, or you go to the dump, or this bad situation, or this just the dregs of life. But that is not like fiery eternal damnation.
Yeah.
So
Yeah.
I was like, okay, it's being misinterpreted here, and I just kept going and going. And when I got to the Lord's Prayer, that's when it kind of hit a soft spot for me because, like I said in the book, I've been wanting to pray, but really, it has been a struggle. Once I decided that I did believe in some kind of intelligent designer or creator or some kind of intelligent source for things, and we give it all kinds of different names. But once I decided that whatever it is, I don't even know, at that point, I didn't even know, but whatever it is, it's intelligent and it's the source. So, but I was still like, I didn't know, how do you pray to that? How do you, without getting back into that Christian thing?
Hmm.
Um, and that's when I realized, as I was going through the New Testament, and I was like, oh, and Jesus says right to his disciples, this is how you should pray. And I was like, boom, okay, let me go through this, and so that I can learn how to pray without, feeling like, bringing up memories of Christianity and as trauma with me, and then to do it in a way that actually means what I'm trying to accomplish here. Like when I'm praying, I'm not just reciting a ritual. I'm trying to communicate with whatever intelligence lies behind the scenes, so that I can, serve my best purpose here in this incarnation here. Um, and it's been fun. It's been really fun figuring this
So,
out.
so why do you think that the Lord's Prayer ended up the way it has, and in your view, misinterpreted?
Um, I mean, who knows what lies in the hearts of men. These things Jesus spoke in Aramaic, okay? The original texts were written in Greek. And also written, I don't know, what do they say, 70 years after Christ's death, something like that.
Yeah.
So So it's not even written in the language. So any of the words that Jesus have spoken have already been translated once before even being written down for the first time.
Hmm.
So, I don't even know how much of it is actual human intent and how much of it is just people, maybe people just apply the best understanding they had to it. But we all interpret things based on what we know, so that makes sense to us.
Hmm.
So let's say you have someone that doesn't really grasp the concepts Jesus was trying to express to us. They're much more liable to misinterpret what he said. And you have things like the Council of Nicaea that, I don't know what it was, 300 AD or so, that kind of decided this is in the Bible and that's not in the Bible, and this says this and this doesn't say that. Um, people want to believe that the Bible is just like this, like that was like the Ten Commandments, handed to Moses from the fiery bush, the burning bush. But it's not. The Bible is written by men, and there's books that are part of the Bible in some traditions and not part of the Bible in other traditions, and we have, you know, who knows how many different translations of it.
Well,
Um,
you had the Romans involved, and they had a vested interest in controlling people and keeping hold of power. And then you had the King James version. Well, there's a king involved there, so he's interested in
oh yeah.
controlling people and maintaining power. You can see, you would hope that their motives are good, but people in positions of extreme power, their motives are not always good. Oh, and we see that again and again and again.
Yeah, I mean, you
So,
can you can have benevolent rulers, and there probably have been some in history. But it's like one thing I believe is true about humans is we're all gray areas. No, there's no good people and bad people. We all have our good days and bad days. Some have, almost nothing but bad days, and they're terrible people. But they're still not bad people. There's some good inside them somewhere, and in the good people, there's some bad inside there. When you look at something like, a book that really shaped me at a certain point in my adult life was the Gulag Archipelago by what was the guy's name that wrote that? But about the about communist Russia and about
right.
all the people that were pushed over the line into doing horrific things to their fellow men, not because they were bad people, but because it was like us or them. It's like if you do it, or you're going to be the one on the end of the
Yeah.
torture device.
And we hear that in
And
in the death camps in the Holocaust. We hear about stories of that. People only following orders and the rest of it. Yeah.
yeah,
Mm.
and it's not that it's not that it was full of wicked people necessarily, and some of them behaved wickedly, but a lot of people just kind of go with the pressure out of self-preservation. Um, and so you know it's there that means there's really no good people, they're just 100% good, that just like, okay, well, he was a good person, so this came out right. Like, everybody's a mixed bag, everybody's a gray area, and
So does
the people.
everybody have the potential of doing bad things in the wrong environment?
Oh, for sure, for sure. I mean, I couldn't. I don't know. It can be a fuzzy line what is good or bad. So,
Okay.
that can be in the eye of the beholder. And depending on the perspective and the situation. But I think there's a proclivity from some people to, I believe we have a karmic burden, and that some people have a lot of ground to make up in that area. If you committed some terrible atrocities in this life, and then the next life you might be bound to, really have some darkness to struggle with. Um, and there are other people that are towards the end of their journey, and maybe they go through their life and don't have to struggle as much with their inner demons because they've made a lot of progress on their soul's journey, and they have an easier time, kind of getting to the peak and staying there. Some of the
So is
great
the
teachers we've
purpose of
had.
life to get better so that for next
The
time?
pur- yeah, the purpose of life. I mean, God, the Creator, wanted to know itself, but in its wholeness, it's hard to know something if you're not separate from it. It's hard to see something without a reflection. And so God created a reflection of himself by splitting himself up into a bunch of little cells, that have the ability to kind of imagine themselves to be separate from him. And that is how God experiences the world. We are how God experiences the world. We are his eyes and ears and noses, and God is sensing the world through us. We are his sensory organs. And but the game wouldn't work if we all remembered that. It would just be, where would the drama and the fun be? So in order to create drama, in order to have the white, you need the black. You have to have some kind of contrast. So the whole game is a matter of separation from God and then the journey back to him. And that's the whole experience of the journey of the soul. However, who knows how long it takes, whether it's thousands or millions of years, but it's the journey from separation to unity. And that's why it's so easy to identify the path towards God. It's always a path towards unity. It's always a path towards coming together in oneness, because that's the ultimate goal. Is It's like a boomerang, it wants to come back to itself, and we're in the process of figuring it out. And I believe it's kind of like a game in a lot of ways, and that can make it kind of fun. Like life as a game is a little bit more fun than life is a terrible drudgery of suffering.
So, what do you hope people get from this book?
um if I could hope for anything, it's for that. It's for hope.
Yeah.
Like, it's a lot of people are afraid. A lot of people are afraid of what happens when you die. What happened? Is there a God? Those kind of things. And fear. In my journey, I've discovered that fear is really the number one obstacle on the path to knowledge and to God. Like fear is the destroyer of all that. If you're trying to go out of body and find God, and all of a sudden you're get afraid, like boom, you're like right back in, you lose it. It's fear puts us into a instant fight or flight mode, like even if it's only the tiniest of fears, even if it's only the tiniest one, even if we don't even recognize it on our radar, um it still does something to us internally. And it makes sense. Like, if you're evolutionary wise, if you were laying on the ground deep in meditation and a predator comes along, you need to be able to snap out of it and fight for your life. So it's a built-in mechanism to protect us, the fear. Um, but it does prevent us from kind of like detaching from this world in order to, access the world beyond. So if I could hope for anything, it's that people, might have hope that there's actually some meaning to this world, and it's not just, a freaking chain reaction disaster. Number one. But number two, like, don't be afraid. Like, there's nothing to fear. I am fearless now. There's nothing I could be afraid of, because even the worst things that could possibly happen to me or any of my loved ones or anyone I know, um, is all temporary. And in the end, we all go back to God. We all go back to the source. We all go back to the one mind, which is what I call it over and over again in the Lord's Prayer. Um, and so therefore, ultimately, there is nothing to fear whatsoever, because no matter what, at a certain point, the game ends, and we go, we end up, man, that was a doozy there. Wow, that was wild. And boy, I'm glad that wasn't real, because I really want to give it another run in maybe a different situation. And um, I think it makes it easier to relax and let go of your fear. And that's a huge benefit, because if you can let go of your fear, that makes it a lot easier to take your journey and make progress. If you can just say, you know what, maybe he's right, maybe there is nothing to fear, maybe I can kind of do the journey of the soul, which is to dive deep inside and find out what's in your heart that you came here to do. And I mean, that's it's a big struggle people have, is, what is my purpose in life? I don't know. Why am I here? What is the purpose of life? Well, it's easy. It's inside of you, and it's the message of your soul. It's the calling of your soul. And it has a lot to do with who we were as little children, because when we get incarnated into this world, um, we haven't been socialized yet. We haven't been given an ego. We haven't come up with an identity, and we're just pureness of like where we come from. And so the tendencies you had as a little kid speak loudly as to what your soul is like. And Like for me, I've always wanted to play music from my earliest memories. So I'm a musician, and I play in 5 different bands, and I write for a music magazine, and because that's my soul's calling. It makes me happy, and it always has. And I think for people to find their purpose, it's as easy as going back and saying, what really brings me true joy to do? What really makes me feel like right at home? And what were the things in my childhood that I really enjoyed? Because our child's I believe our soul is our inner child. I believe those things are linked, and that we have inner child work we do in therapy and whatnot. um, but that inner child work is really the work of healing the soul, because that's who gets wounded in these things, is the soul. That's been my whole work with the alchemy the last couple of years, which has been really helped me tie everything together. That was the final step for me. It was learning about hermetic alchemy, because the language of it helped me to really understand the process, in a way that made sense. And the steps of alchemy are very simple. It's basically purify yourself so that you can come to know who you are deep inside, and then figure out who that is inside, and then unite with that so that your inner purpose is the same as your outer purpose, so that the life you're living is the same life that your inner self, or maybe your dreaming body, or your higher self, or whatever you think that is behind the scenes, that makes more of who we are. That part of us under the surface. You unite with the below and the above within yourself. And in alchemy, that's called the Lesser Philosopher's Stone, which is, kind of the first major accomplishment in alchemy. And unite the spirit with the soul, unify yourself, and that empowers you now to, really live your life's mission on Earth. And that's a beautiful thing, because, your mission it's things that make you happy. It's things that give you joy. It's things you want to do. So the whole path isn't about power or achieving something like that. It's about just finding out who you truly are, and then living that life the best you can. Um, so that's been really helpful, and I feel like I hit that point a couple of years ago, and since then it's been kind of like it's almost like, okay, like some people have like a spiritual breakthrough, like they'll take a psychedelic, or they'll go to a retreat or something and come out with like some grand idea of like how they should be living their life. And but then they get back to their life and they find it's incompatible with their dreams, and pretty much you're back to the routine again, and you're like,
Mhm.
oh, I had this grand vision. I was going to live life so free, and I was going to get up in the morning and meditate every day and do this stuff. And then your life gets in the way of that. And next thing you know, the change is gone, and that's a memory. So it's important. This is the unification part. This is, no, your daily life needs to support that, so that the day comes where you awaken that spirit inside. He needs to be able to step right into your life and keep functioning, so that you can just stay there, because otherwise you'll slip back in, you'll lose it. You have to build your whole life around something that honors who you really are, so that when you make that transition, it's not a shock to the world, and it's not a shock to yourself. You just step in to the same world you've been living in an inspired way, and you just say, oh man, I feel really great about it now, because I've created this life around me, and it's in agreement with exactly what I want to do. And what more could you ask for than that in life? Really, what more could you ask for? um, so that's my path, and that's why I wrote this book, because I'm always writing long things on forums, or I'm writing to podcasts, or I'm writing letters to people, and I would frequently say, oh, I should write a book. um, and this actually isn't even the book I was working on. I'm working on a book called Temple of Illusion, and it's about using the theory of the world as a simulation, as kind of a jumping off point to lessons in spirituality, um, as a way to take people who have no experience with things like Buddhism or shamanism, or, things that have this whole language barrier or culture barrier to understanding what they're talking about. Well, I want to take it and put it in terms of video games. which is what everyone can understand video games these days. If you can't understand video games, like, well, I guess you're just not my audience, but. But I feel like that's a language where you can like reach people because you're not going to reach, you have a hard time reaching kids with some kind of Sanskrit meditation, or you know what, you're not going to reach kids with my book, the New Lord's Prayer. This is something that, as I was writing the book, I wanted to make a Substack and just start writing small pieces more regularly to start building an audience and whatnot. And but then when this came out, I put so much work into it, and it was very inspired. And I was guided by Spirit that this was actually the message that Spirit was guiding me to put out. Not so much the big book, which I'm working on, but that this here is kind of like really sums up the core message of what Spirit is trying to speak through me, which is, you know, that you should, we're all part of the same grand body, and we're all connected behind the scenes, and that the most important thing is to love and support each other. Um, and I feel like that's the message I try to get across in the book. Is just it ends up coming across, and the summary is basic human values: love, honesty, compassion. Um, but it also, for me, it made the whole experience real. Like when I pray the Lord's Prayer, um, I really, having knowing each word I've chosen, I know exactly what I mean, and I feel like that helps me make that connection to the source, and just kind of, I'm done living a one way street. I'm ready to talk to God again, and it's still really new to me. And I still have some aversion to built-in aversion to Jesus, which I shouldn't, because I believe Jesus was a brilliant human being, and I everything I've reread so far aligns with the values that you would read in, of the Buddha, or of many other teachers. Um, but yeah, it's just that cultural programming thing. It's hard to kick. It is. So I'm working on that, but that may be what my role is here. I mean, we all have our roles based on our own experience, and I'm the ex-Christian kid who did a bunch of psychedelics and figured out what he thought the truth was, and also speaks the language of, Kabbalah, or the tarot, or astrology, or I even got into Aleister Crowley for a while, and
Oh, wow,
the
that's heavy
occult.
stuff. Yeah.
It is, and some of those things fell by the wayside because I've kind of, you know, been able to kind of, as I make progress as far as feeling like what I know for sure. Um, I feel like the darkness is a distraction, and there's some darkness in some of that occult stuff. And I kind of use that as a litmus test. Um, like for instance, as I was kind of coming out of this experience the last few months, I've been reevaluating things because I feel like I can just look at something now and I can just tell if it's really aligned with the true message, or if it's just people on the path that are trying to get there but don't really know yet. And some things I've been like, yes, this guy knows. Yes, this guy knows. I picked up. I don't know if you're familiar with the Book of the Subgenius. It's a old kind of fringe cult religion from like the 60s, 70s, kind of psychedelic based in America. And it kind of, approached as kind of like a little comic book kind of version of religion. And it was very satirical and, very kind of Mad Magazine style. And things like, quit your job and slack off was, one of their big slogans.
Oh,
But
along with like Timothy Leary type stuff. Tune in, turn
yes,
on, and
he was.
drop out.
Yes, they were associated with Timothy Leary. Timothy Leary
Okay.
wasn't. I don't think he was a member, but Timothy Leary's good friend Robert Anton Wilson, who was a hero of mine for a long time, still is. Uh, he was Timothy Leary's sidekick, and he was heavily involved with the Church of the Subgenius. So there's some real good nuggets in there of fun stuff, and it makes it fun and approachable and kind of silly, kind of don't take yourself too seriously kind of approach. So I went back and I examined that, and I said, well, let's see, if these guys know the truth or if they're just trying. And I got to the chapter they have called Creative Truth, and it's basically, that the subgenius has 100% the right to completely lie to anybody they see at any time for any reason. It's basically you should feel the right to just be completely dishonest with anyone you want for any reason. And I know that doesn't align with, the vibe of the creator, which is all honesty and truth and reality, and not hiding or concealing things. So it allowed me to say, okay, Church of the Subgenius, good try, but I'm not really interested in pursuing any more association or going back and revisiting the books or trying to look, because I know you don't know. I know you don't know. Um, I'll tell you someone I think does know is the great producer Rick Rubin.
Hmm.
Um, here's a guy who he's not a guru. He's not out writing books about spirituality and stuff. But when you listen to him speak, he says it all. He says all the things about God and about love and about purity and honesty. And his podcast is called Tetragrammaton. Which is the holy name of God, Jehovah.
Okay.
Little chimes and bells in the thing. He's got all these little clues, but he's never going to come out and say, "I'm a Zen master." But I'm going to
Yeah.
say it here. I'm going to say it. He's a total Zen master. I've listened to a bunch of his stuff. He knows the deal. He's been there. He's seen it. He understands. He's living the life. And he's got so much great advice. So, yeah. So, a guy like Rick Rubin, he's in. A guy like
I think
Church of the
people one
Genius
day
is
will
out.
talk about Tommy Sage the same way, especially after this book. The Lord's Prayer, uniting philosophy and religion to bring us closer to the source. It's out now as an audiobook. How did you find the experience of turning it into an audiobook? Because there's a whole new dimension to it, isn't there?
Oh, it sure is. It was very easy. It was very easy. It was a little overwhelming with all the auditions because it was on day two. I had about 40 people in my inbox and growing with people that wanted to audition for it. And so I did a lot of listening to people, and there's a lot of great narrators there. There was a number of good ones I could have chosen, but yours really stood out. I really felt like you really showed a patience of mind, a determination to get the phrasing right, and the proper emphasis on certain words and phrases. I thought yours was head and shoulders above some of the competitors there. So I was very happy to choose you for the work, and I feel like it gives it kind of like a space and a little bit of grandeur, and it dresses it up a little bit, which I appreciate.
Well, thank you so much. I really enjoyed doing the book, and I found it fascinating. And at the time, I didn't know how deep the research and how deep you went into it. But I'm finding out now that this so far is the culmination of your life's journey, I suppose, to find the truth, isn't it? And now you're sharing it with the world in the book and in the audiobook.
Yes, it really is. It is. This is the culmination of my life's work, and I did not expect to hit it at 48 years old, and I did not expect to do it in written form. I'm a musician, like I'm not. But I've always been writing behind the scenes. I'm a writer and a musician. I've come to terms with that, and I need to keep writing. But it almost feels like, it almost takes the pressure off me in a certain way. It's kind of like now I feel like I've kind of like rather than like climbing this arduous mountain, and I gotta know, I gotta know, I gotta know, and now I'm just like, okay, well, what do I do now? Like I kind of hit the top of the mountain, and what do I do now? And I'm figuring that out, and it's a new journey, and it's less about healing myself and finding answers, and more about being able to share what I can with people, who, everyone's on their own journey. People aren't on the same, part of the journey I am. Everyone's on their own stage, and I think we can all help each other learn something, if we share. So yeah, that's all I want to do is share it a little bit. I'm not trying to convert anybody. I'm not trying to create a church or a cult or anything weird like that. Like I just like, but hey, I had this crazy experience. I went out of body on ketamine like 3 times a week for like 6 straight weeks with the intent of discovering the true nature of things behind the scenes. I feel like I've achieved that. I'm gonna keep writing about what I've seen, and there's a lot. I'm gonna write a lot. There's plenty to write about. It's hard to take on face value probably, and I don't write online about the psychedelic drug aspect so much because a lot of people just write that off right off the bat. Um, but the truth is, there's a lot of consistency to it, and when you look across cultures and across different types of drugs and whatnot, like I've come to the determination that what the drug does is not create kind of a new experience, but more kind of dissolve this waking experience to reveal what's kind of hidden behind it. And lots of drugs can do that in different ways, but there's so much, you end up seeing the same kind of things. And the stories are so common. Um, and many people come out of these experiences feeling like where they've been is more real than the world we walk around in every day. And I'm one of those people. I feel like I'm kind of like I don't know, almost like in a spacesuit or something. I'm kind of tethered off way in the distance. I got this like tether, like not literally, but just kind of in my imagination. And like I'm just in this like suit body here and this thing, but this isn't really where I reside. I reside with all my other brothers and sisters like you. All we're all together in one big pig pile, man. There's no separateness on the other side. It's really like it's a telepathic jumble of everybody. And that's what makes this experience so special is that we get to separate out from that and like just do free will individuality. Let's throw it against the wall and see what sticks. And it's a beautiful thing, I think.
The book is called The New Lord's Prayer, Uniting Philosophy and Religion to Bring Us Closer to the Source. Tommy Sage, thank you so much.
Hey, thanks so much, Graham. It's been a pleasure.